at NTV.
Well, good morning and welcome to Morning at NTV. My name is Idris Matu and this is Everyday Life. Now, access to information is a fundamental human right, but oftentimes this right is obstructed. Now, in studios, I have Gilbert Sendugwa, an activist from Africa Freedom of Information Center. Mr. Gilbert, you are welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Is this your first time on TV?
Not really.
Not really.
Yeah.
So you're
I've been here
used to this, you're a star. Well, it's good to have you here. Now, tell us about...
good morning, dear viewers.
Yes. Now, tell us about Africa Freedom of Information Center. What do you do? What services do you provide?
Yeah, the Africa Freedom of Information Center is a Pan-African civil society membership organization and resource center that promotes the right of access to information by citizens. When I say information here, I mean information held by public bodies like government departments, ministries and agencies, and also private agencies that perform public functions or use public resources. But for the case of Uganda, the law restricts this to only government departments, ministries and agencies.
Now, in 2005, the Act to Access of Information was passed. How are you involved in the implementation of this act?
Yeah, thank you very much. A lot of people are involved in, and organizations are involved in promoting the implementation of the Access to Information Act. One of the ways how AFIC is involved is building capacities, both of public officials and of civil society. And in this regard, we have developed resource manuals for journalists, for public officials, and for civil society. We also do a lot of training and capacity building of these stakeholders, because it's when people know that they have a right that they can exercise it. If they don't know and also how to exercise it, then it becomes difficult to use the registration, even if it is in place.
For some people who are not aware of the 2005 Access to Information Act, what does it entail and why is it even important to the citizens of Uganda?
Yeah, the Act establishes 4 objectives. Among these is to promote an efficient, effective, transparent and accountable government. And here I think every citizen can ask if any of the government agencies they are aware about is this transparent, accountable and responsive. The second objective is to operationalize the Article 41 of the Constitution, which guarantees the right to information for every citizen. The Act also is intended to empower citizens to hold government officials to account by giving them power to release information which they would otherwise not want to release, especially if, for example, maybe information regarding decisions officials may have made either are unlawful or in violation of public interest.
Now, this information, is it only from the government bodies or even social services agencies and organizations?
Yeah, the Access to Information Act of Uganda restricts this only to public agencies, which means ministries, departments and agencies, constitutional commissions, parastatals, and local governments, among others.
Now, to break it down for a layman, what kind of information can I be able to access from a government body, like a ministry? What kind of information can I go there and say, you know what, I have a right to access this information?
Yeah, thank you very much. The Act actually guarantees access to all public records. They could be minutes of meetings, they could be contracts, they could be reports of studies, they could be budgets, they could be, accountability information. So all information held by that agency, except according to the Constitution, information whose disclosure may injure national security or violate the right to privacy of an individual. So basically, we're talking about all the information unless it touches on these two things. Now, when you go to the Access to Information Act, there's more information that is protected. Some of it reasonably, some of it not consistent with international standards. For example, the Act protects cabinet records and records of subcommittees of cabinet. Now, this is a problem because information should be protected on the basis of what is contained in that record, not on the basis of who holds that information. So, in that case, then it might defeat the objectives of the Act, which is to transport an efficient, effective, transparent, and accountable government. So there is a problem there which needs to be cured by an amendment of this Act so that is consistent with international standards.
2005, it's more than 10 years back. And I must say, has the Act been used by the citizens, or is it one of those acts that have been passed and then forgotten about, and then it has been there dormant, Has it been used? Is it an active act that people know about?
The people who know have used it, and we see good things which have come up as a result of use of the Access to Information Act, both on the government side and also on citizens' side. On the government side, the major benefit is that when people have information on what government is about, what the government is doing, how it is doing it, there is increased trust in the government and the officials who run the government and government agencies. On the contrary, if people don't have information, there is a deficit of trust. So now, Idris, if I ask, do you trust, for example, the Ministry of Lands?
I don't even know what they are doing.
So that means that there is that information gap which exists, and that is true for every citizen. But on the question of how is the law useful, we have seen cases, for example, recently in northern Uganda, where people used this information request. They asked, why has this health center been constructed but there is no placenta pit? What are you going to do with the waste? And as a consequence of that, the local government responded well and constructed a pit. So you can see how this has been difficult, possible for people to engage government and get a service. In Kabare, 2016, a group of people we trained made an information request regarding information for construction of a teacher's house, which had stalled for a very long time. So on site it had stalled, but records, when they got them, they found that actually the contract
had been completed
and all payments had been made.
Oh, wow.
So they moved the RDC and COW to come to the site, and they were shocked that actually this was a state of things. And as a consequence, the contractor was required to come and rectify this situation. And there are many hundreds of these cases that we have where we've seen that people have used their access to information.
But aren't there also cases whereby the information has been denied?
Yes, there are indeed many cases. One of these is in Bushenyi, for example, in 2011, where we had this case involving a stadium. Government had paid of almost 1 billion for this contract. 5 years down the road, there was nothing other than heaps of sand. And when our partners requested for information, it was denied until court action was taken and records were revealed. Now, when we examined records, we found that you know, there was a huge problem that all this money had been paid and there was no work done. Yet, records showed that there were completion certificates for each phase, that work had been satisfactorily done and payments should be made, and indeed payments were made. So there are cases where information has been denied, but almost in all of those cases, there has been there's been a struggle between public interest vis-a-vis private interest. Like, people have taken resources from the government, they have not done work, and that's why the attempts to conceal this information.
Well, as Africa Freedom of Information Center, you're there to advocate for the freedom to access to information. Has there been challenges for the Act, for the Access to Information Act, for the over 10 years past? Has there been challenges?
Yes, there's been challenges. Some of the challenges are in the law itself, that some of the provisions are not progressive. The second set of challenges is capacity, both on the citizen side and on the government side. And then the third aspect is on the will, the lack of will to be accountable and open. So
to release
in terms of
information.
So in terms of the Act, some of the provisions need a second look to amend. I had already talked about the need to amend the Act so that information is only protected on the basis of what is contained in that record. The other major weakness is that the oversight. The Act does not provide for a strong oversight. And you know, implementation of a registration is as good as the oversight that it has. So there's need to have an independent commission which can, when information is refused, can review and determine whether or not the agencies were right to deny information or not. But also to conduct promotion measures, you know, capacitate public agencies, capacitate citizens to use the law, to report to Parliament, and so that people's representatives know how complying these agencies are. So those are sets of things, among others, that relate to weaknesses in the registration. And we have made recommendations actually for where we think that the law needs to be amended. Now, on the capacity side, you find that people make, people have challenges which could be resolved by getting the information from public agencies, but they don't know that actually they have a right.
The right to access.
And when they do, they also don't know that we can access, how to exercise this right. How do you make an information request? There's also another challenge that the law says that you use gazetted forms to make information requests. Now, you can imagine people in villages, will they walk, you know, thousands of kilometers to be able to access these forms? There are places where they don't have internet. Will they have abilities to download from the website, fill the form and do that? Now, when the law was passed, you know, technology was not as advanced as it is
today.
But we see agencies reluctant to respond to online information requests. There's this wonderful portal, the askyourgov.ug portal, which enables citizens to make information requests and for government to respond through online, which would make life easier. But you look at this portal and you find agencies like KCCA, you find agencies like Uganda Revenue Authority, and many others not responding to these requests. In fact, I think after the program, you can visit that and
the website.
See.
It's ask
and gauge for yourself and the public whether these agencies are transparent, open, and accountable as the law.
The portal is askyourgov.ug. So anyone can access it, and you can ask questions to government bodies or even social services bodies about information that you need. Probably records or to hold them accountable, because you have the right to access information if you didn't know that. Now, just going back to you, the implementation has had challenges that you have broken down here and there and there. But what is your role as a FIC?
Okay. In the case of Uganda, where the law is in place, we advocate for amendments so that it becomes strong and good for people to use. But we also work very closely with government and also citizens in the area of capacity building. So we have done lots of training, and where we have trained people, we see there has been a good improvement. Even services have improved as regards this. Also on the government side, there has been responsiveness. In 2011, for example, we did a survey where we found that for every 5 requests made, only 1 would be responded to. And response here means that either they agree to provide the requested information, or they say, no, we are not going to give you this information. Now, following the training,
just ignored.
Yes, so we did training in 5 districts. And after 12 weeks, we went back and corrected the data. Now, when we analyzed it, we found that there had been a huge increase in the number of requests that people were making, those that were trained. And we analyzed this information. We found that, for example, in the case of Hoima, 71.8% of the requests had been responded to within those 12 weeks. So our conclusion, and this was across the 5 districts. So our conclusion was that capacity is a major driver for responsiveness, for use and responsiveness, use on the citizen side and responsiveness on the government side. So we also do monitoring of implementation. So we do shadow reports to treaty bodies like the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, the UN Human Rights Council, among others. And of course, if you visit our website, www.africafycenter.org, you'll find lots of resources, lots of knowledge products that we have produced.
Where can we find you physically? Do you have a physical address?
Yes, we are at plot
436/7
Mawanda Road, and the building is called Corner House.
Suite F4.
Yes.
So what kind of services do I access if I come to your offices?
We support mainly organizations, but we don't say people don't come. But some of them, they come and say, we have this challenge. For example, there's a group which came recently to ask, in Mukono there is a stone quarry, and it had caused a lot of pollution of water, pollution of air, pollution of the whole environment, and people, according to these people, were suffering even health consequences. So they wanted assistance on how they could be, assisted. So we helped them to identify which agencies had the necessary information and how to ask for that.
To go forward with their case.
Later, when they were denied, then we provided assistance on how their right could be enforced through courts. Luckily enough, at that stage, the agency agreed to provide needed information, and as I speak, they are working together with this group to ensure that this company, which has been polluting, is complying with the conditions that they had been given in their environmental impact assessment.
Well, Mr. Gilbert, as we run out of time, just one last word from you on how the government can actually improve the implementation of the Act, the Access to Information 2005 Act.
Yeah, as we speak now, only one agency is budgeting for access to information implementation. So our recommendation is that every agency should budget, allocate money for access to information implementation, because every agency is required to implement the law. Secondly, the law in Section 43 requires every minister to report to Parliament on an annual basis how the law is being implemented. I think, and up to now, there hasn't been compliance with this obligation. So this needs to be done. urgently to put in place mechanisms within each agency for receiving and responding to information requests in statutory time.
So, in other words, there is so much the government can do to improve this access
Yes,
to information.
and we are very well to partner with government to
Yes.
To
improve the access to information.
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know we have little time, but I hope we get a chance to break this down in the future. Well, if you have been watching, just go to our website, which is www.ntv.co.ug, to continue the conversation. And you can access this interview on our YouTube channel. Just look out for NTV Uganda and Everyday Life on Morning at NTV. Well, you can also go to our social media platforms, that is Facebook and Twitter. Look out for Morning at NTV or NTV Uganda, or look out for me, Idris Matu, and talk to me on what you want to see on the show, what you want to talk about, any grievances that you have in your society. We shall help you, we shall give you a voice. Well, coming up next is Mwasu Zamtia. Have a very good morning.